Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Um, just going to give people another moment to settle back at their desk with a cup of coffee or whatever before we get started. But welcome everybody to today's webinar session. We'll just sit tight, as I said, for a few seconds more before we get underway. Alrighty, I can see quite a few people join now, even in the last moment or two. So let's get underway. We're here today to talk about the payment you didn't authorize, how fraudsters are targeting AP teams and companies in general in 2026. My name is Garret Pearse. I'm a senior sales consultant or technical consultant with SoftCo. SoftCo deliver accounts payable solutions to our customers worldwide. And what I wanted to share with you today is my job takes me into conversations with finance teams, IT and security teams around the world, our customers, people in the business, and wanted to share with you some of the experiences that we're hearing about that you may well have heard about through the press as well, and how they impact and relate to what you do within your finance team or AP team specifically. And also then, that's the bad news. There's some horror stories out there, but I think the good news is there's a lot of ways that we can help you control and mitigate and prevent some of those horror stories happening with your organization. So the agenda for today, if I move on, is we'll talk about what's out there, what's happening, what are fraudsters doing, and illustrate that with a few real cases, some of which you may have already even heard about. And then we'll look at where those frauds get in, how they manage to manipulate it, and more importantly then how we can stop it. So measures you can take, and it's not just technical measures, it's internal policy measures, it's training measures and things like that. But then supported by the technology, we'll show you how, for example, within SoftCo, we're providing a number of pieces in our puzzle within our solution to help you protect yourself against these types of fraud attempts or fraud attacks. And at the end, we'll have some time for questions and answers. There's a webinar control through which you can submit your questions. I will try to answer some questions during the session, but if there's others that I'm not able to get to, we will try and reply to you afterwards. And I will be looking for some little bit of feedback in terms of carrying out a couple of brief polls, which actually I might just start. I'll start one in a few moments just to get some sense of where your organization is at in the fraud prevention journey. But just to talk about some of those examples of fraud as it's happened out in the world, the AI power that these fraudsters have, just the social engineering skills, etc., really mean you have to be on your toes. So just to talk about some of them, one of these, which was in the press a few months ago, was a $25 million fraud against a company. And it was multifaceted. It started with an email, a phishing email coming in, impersonating their CFO to one of the members of the finance team. And even though they were paying attention and a little bit skeptical, I think what sold the deal was the fraudsters' ability to get them on a video call. And what they had actually done was, by harvesting images from online videos in social media, the likes of LinkedIn, the likes of Facebook, they had been able to create deepfake live video images of the CFO and other members of the team, so that from the employee's point of view, it appeared that he was having a live discussion with these people, instructing them to carry out a payment which bypassed some of their controls. But if you're talking to your boss, it can be very hard to resist, or what appears to be your boss. So that ended up in a number of transfers taking place, costing the company 25 million. But I think while the sophistication of using a video call is quite shocking, I think from all our interactions with the likes of ChatGPT, etc., we're starting to understand just how feasible and how easy that can be done. and the initial contact was done via an email that appeared genuine. And again, we'll see as we look at some of these others, there's a constant theme of it's not always just one big event that leads to the fraud. It's little gradual drip by drip steps that lead to the fraud ultimately being able to be executed. So again, this $203,000 fraud for a US company started with what looked like a routine email from their insurance broker. And again, that was followed up a few days later with an email from the same address requesting a bank detail update. So the first email was innocuous enough, just updating some invoice details. And the second one, having established the kind of bona fides, was looking to change some of the payment details. But the key thing was, instead of coming from the legitimate broker's email address, it was coming from a different domain with a -ca.com instead of the genuine.ca address. The company unfortunately missed that subtle difference and went ahead and paid 203,000 Canadian dollars. So again, just starting with drip by drip, first little innocuous little contact, and what they have time on their hands, they're willing to spend a number of weeks having very innocuous interactions from fake email addresses or via the phone or whatever, until they ultimately have established a level of trust that will lead to somebody making a fatal payment like that. And again, just in a more general sense, the UK's National Crime Agency, along with NatWest Bank, look back at statistics in the UK, and in 1 month alone, £3.9 million in fraud was carried out. And I think the theme, which I'll touch on in a moment, is that's what's reported, that's what's known about. I think we all know of cases where payments were made and it was brushed under the carpet, it was covered up, it wasn't necessarily reported due to financial considerations, due to even just embarrassment or public image reasons. But it is happening in all jurisdictions across all businesses where these frauds are taking place. And again, looking at the US market, it's 3 billion is the amount on an annual basis, again, that is known about of fraudulent transactions that are taking place, whether it's a spoofed email account or even going as far as setting up a fake company and getting that company set up as a supplier and getting payments made to that fake company. So I think the message is the same. The numbers are publicly very large, but again, I think you can probably multiply that by a factor of 10 to what actually happens and doesn't get reported. As I said, a lot of companies really don't want to be publishing their embarrassing missteps, shall we say. I think I speak to customers all the time, and every customer I speak to will have seen an attempt at this type of fraud in one way or another take place. So I think everybody's been on the receiving end of attempts. Hopefully far fewer have actually fallen for it. So that's I suppose the dark news, the bad news in terms of what's out there in terms of people trying to defraud our organizations of money in a number of different ways. I think when you look at that, they tend to follow a couple of similar patterns or things that people are trying to do. One obviously is the bank detail changes, is that ultimate attempt to get the company, get you to change that company's payment details to one that will redirect any funds paid to them to the fraudsters' bank accounts. That's one attempt. And the other is establishing what looks like a valid vendor that maybe impersonates a real vendor that you deal with in the real world, or one that you're aware of in the real world, but pretends to be them, provides what looks like legitimate, valid documentation and leads you to setting up what you think is a valid vendor, but is actually set up pointing to that fraudster's bank account. And again, as we see through the kind of social engineering attempts, it's introducing that element of urgency. It's sending in emails with high importance or with a tone or phrasing that puts the employee on the back foot. This needs to happen fast. It's my CEO telling me to do something. It's my CFO telling me to do something. It looks on the surface of it legitimate, so therefore I should do it. So moving on then, as I said, what I've just explained is really those requests, they look legitimate. If you're not putting it through a proper independent verification step or taking the time to look at what's been asked, or somebody, because of the urgency or what appears to be the source of the message, they're bypassing the control, all of that leads to payments being redirected, released, authorized, that shouldn't happen. And again, the thing that can happen is these may not be picked up for a period of time. With that broker fraud, where they impersonated the broker and got them to change their payment details, it only came to light after a number of payments had been made, and the broker went looking for the money, asking why they hadn't been paid, and that was when they realized they'd been tricked into redirecting the funds elsewhere. So I want to talk now about what are the things you can do to stop that within your organization, and some of them are very straightforward, very obvious, and not necessarily technical. First on segregation of duties. So that is making sure that the person who maybe can change the payment details isn't the person who executes the payment. The person who reviews the request isn't the person who updates the system or who approves that. So making sure there's clear delineation between people in your organization who can do the different things, so that you have, certainly at the very minimum, 2 or 3 people reviewing each change and making sure everything is done correctly. Making sure that you have processes in place to make sure that it's not just, you're not just basing a change of information or setting up a vendor based on information that's being provided to you externally, but you're going through your own channels to verify it. And we'll talk about how we've done that through the SoftCo solution. It's continuous re-verification. It's making sure that just because you onboarded the vendor and everything looked good, that you're continuously validating that nothing's changed in some way. Having an audit history, I think, gives comfort and just lets people know that what they're doing is being tracked, and makes employees just aware that the reason it's being done is for the reason that people are trying to defraud them. So keeping a full record of what's happening. When you're onboarding vendors, making sure that the way you've set that up is carrying out all the checks that you need, that you're validating the bank details, you're validating the company information, you're carrying out things to make sure that if they say this is their bank account, that bank account is indeed registered to a company of that name. And also more broadly, and it's not just necessarily around fraud, but it's also making sure that you're compliant in who you deal with. So taking advantage of sanctions list, watch list validation to make sure that the company you're dealing with is, first of all, reputable and that isn't showing up on a sanctions list somewhere, and also that they're not subject to adverse media that would make you reconsider your relationship with them. And that doesn't necessarily happen with fraudulent companies, it can also just happen with companies who've done something else to make you wary of your dealings with them. So ultimately, it's down to global know your business, validating who you're dealing with, and taking advantage. The last one here, we've left AI till the end, and I think that's important to put AI in context. In a lot of the conversations that I have at various conferences I go to, I think everybody's very keen to involve AI in all areas of their business and in the finance area. But I always caveat that you need to make sure that it's doing what you want in a controlled way. AI is fantastic. It's incredibly powerful. It's also, as we've seen with other media reports, it has the power to do things incredibly efficiently, but wrong. So you need to be very aware of where AI is being used in the process. Make sure that it's doing things in a way that you want it to do it, that's not making any decisions on your behalf, that you're not in full control of the criteria upon which it's making those decisions. And that's within SoftCo, we have a very clear internal rule book that we follow, that where we're applying AI, we're very conscious of the area of the business we work in, that it's a finance is a conservative, control-based, secure area, that things need to be done with consideration and care, so that anything that AI is doing, it's fully explainable and fully auditable and fully controllable. So, having talked about those, a couple of areas that I'm just going to illustrate some of what I've been talking about with some brief product demonstration. I think with the time, we're conscious of not taking too much of your time today, so looking to get everything done within the 30 minutes or so. But just want to give you a flavor of areas where we're leveraging our own technology platform or interfacing with validation authorities out on a global basis to help when you're onboarding or making changes to your supplier data, so what we call supplier lifecycle management. So as you bring on new suppliers, as those suppliers look to make data changes, that we're able to validate who they are, that we're keeping a constant watch for any watch list presentation of the suppliers, any people associated with those organizations falling foul, or just general adverse media being available about the organizations you're dealing with. So that's at the kind of supplier interaction level. And then what we're looking at the kind of individual transaction level is using AI to detect anything normal, as invoices flow into your system, as emails flow into your system, that we're able to detect and flag anything that doesn't look right. So I'm going to take a very brief few moments just to show you that in an example. I'll just talk very quickly about our supplier management, supplier lifecycle management product. In a nutshell, what it allows you to do is put controls around how vendors, suppliers get onboarded into your organization, from having it go through an initial request if an internal user wants to onboard a new supplier, to making sure that that vendor then completes the registration with all of the information you need from them and attaches any supporting documentation that you may require. We can then carry out automated online checks to validate they are who they say they are, their bank details match up with who they say they are, and then and only then it will go through an internal review process, and then at the very end, when you're happy with everything, do we make that data available to create the new vendor record in your ERP. So it's putting controls at the front and center of that process, as opposed to what we will often see is PDF forms being sent around, data being manually entered from system to system, changes being made with limited traceability or auditability. We're looking to replace all of that. And likewise, when somebody needs to make a change, a very similar process, that we can do that in a controlled way. We can validate those changes to make sure that they are legitimate before we go making those changes live. So I'm just going to briefly log in into our supplier lifecycle management as a user. What that's giving me visibility is of submitted new supplier requests. So these are suppliers who've been invited to onboard with my fake company, our demo company, sorry, Carter Inc. And what we can see here is there's a number here that require my review. So if we, for example, if you look at a simple example here, I've got a request, Data Service Limited. This is a request that they've filled out all of the required information for Carter. It's come back into me for review. And just to kind of skip to the key details, one of the pieces of information we've asked them to provide is their bank account details. It's an IBAN. And what we've been able to do in the background automatically before it gets presented to me as a user is validate, yes, that's a valid IBAN. We can validate the ownership of that IBAN account so that I know when I approve this application that it's been done that this is valid information that the supplier has provided. And again, those bank validations, we do them in over 50 countries worldwide. I'll just show one for an American bank account. And if I just click through here, what we'll see is US bank account. Again, this is just for a demonstration bank account, but the idea here is we've been able to validate the bank account. We can also validate the TIN number, etc. So we're doing multifaceted validation there. One other thing that just turned on recently is the let me just check and see if I can get one that's showing here. Is we can, as you add a new request, I might just add a new request here just to show you, but if we add a new request to onboard a new supplier, I'm going to And so this is what your business users will be able to do. Again, it can check and make sure we don't already have a supplier of that. It's found one that has a similar name. I'm going to override that here, but it's warning me there again that the email address is already in use, but I can bypass that. Put in some additional information, so we're making sure that all the controls at the start, that your business users are providing all the relevant information we're going to need. So this is all configured to whatever information you particularly need. So all of these fields are completely at your discretion. And as soon as I do that, what you'll see is the first thing it's going off and doing is doing some watch list screening. Now this is obviously a demo system, so it's hope you're going to come back with, yeah, everything good. But the idea here is right from the get-go, we're putting checks in place to make sure that they're not, the company we're looking to engage with isn't on any global watch lists, there's not any politically exposed persons involved, there's not any adverse media. So it's getting those controls right at the very front that I think are critical, that you start as you mean to continue. So ultimately, as I said, with the process, once it's gone through this automated review in terms of sanctions list, bank account validation, TIN validation, we can have it go through a visual, manual, multi-step approval within your organization, but we're putting all those checks in place before that data gets into your ERP from which payments can be made. If we take a step back and then think about the transactions that you're receiving relating to those suppliers, one of the most obvious ones is obviously invoices are coming in, very often PDFs via email. And I've just logged into the SoftCo AP platform here as an AP manager, and one of my dashboards is showing me what exceptions or anomalies the SoftCo AP platform has detected, and the subcategory of that are frauds and anomalies here, so things that look suspicious. So it can be as simple as business rules where PO isn't provided by a supplier as required, or it's a duplicate invoice, but in a more sinister way, you can see it's flagged an invoice here from Staples that it just looks as like a suspicious transaction. So if I click into here, the warning I'm getting is this invoice just fails on a couple of bases. The email address looks fake. It doesn't match to who we usually receive from. You can see it's an L, sorry, a 1 instead of an L in the email address, which is a kind of classic phishing attempt strategy. The bank account details on it don't match what we have for the vendor, and the amount is out of whack with what we would usually be paying to Staples for a tip, based on analyzing previous invoices from them. And again, if I look at the content, the PDF they sent in, you can see it's really trying to put the AP team under pressure and have them bypass the controls. But in this case here, we would just looking to automatically cancel in some scenarios, or at least give you the opportunity to review and then cancel that invoice before it goes any further and leads to any incorrect payments in your organization. So a couple of, as I said, simple enough, hopeful examples of how we can prevent things happening from your supplier interactions and then with the individual invoice transactions that are coming through to you. And if we look based on that, I'm just going to fire a quick poll off at this stage to if you could just indicate which feels like the biggest exposure of your organization or team. Is it those bank details changes? Is it vendor onboarding? Where do you feel that you're most vulnerable? Or what do you think are the areas that you would like to address, shall we say, within your organization? So if you're able to take a few moments to answer that, we'd really appreciate that. And while you're doing that, just to reiterate what good looks like. So making sure your suppliers are fully verified, that you've got not just the information they provided, but you've been able to independently verify that information, that any bank details or bank changes have been confirmed independently. You've got a consistent process that goes across your organization. So you need to ensure that while maybe your head office is very secure processes, that you don't have a sub office where they're able to do the supplier onboarding but not follow those same checks and validations. Have full auditability and fewer fraud. That will lead to fewer fraud events, hopefully none, and fewer surprises, which no finance team wants. So I'll just stop that poll there. And I think the key things to bear in mind is what we're seeing is fraud is designed, these fraud attempts are designed to look more and more normal, to catch you off guard, to suck you into a feeling of false security, and that's when they can take advantage. So you need to be on the lookout at all times. Keep an eye on those particular interaction points, the new vendor, the bank changes, those urgent requests to do something that doesn't correspond with how you would usually do things. And what's available now with SoftCo, with what we do, there's other complementary tools that we can interact with as well to provide you with the protection that you need from these fraudulent attempts. So with that in mind, I might just open the floor up to any questions you may have. Just going to see if there's any specific questions. Can't see one that's been sent in terms of, does this work alongside our ERP, or where exactly does it fit? So that's an important question. So we can sit basically, your ERP remains your system of record. It's where you would ultimately be creating your new vendor/supplier accounts. The SoftCo supplier lifecycle management sits in front of that. So any new requests would go through our validation process, our approval process, before we interface that data into your ERP to publish those changes against your either a new supplier record or update an existing one. Also, if something does get flagged, what happens? I think that the main thing is we will stop things proceeding any further. If something isn't right, if we can't validate the bank details, if the TIN number doesn't match up when we're onboarding a supplier, that's going to stop the process right then and there. We'll make you aware of it. Human error and legitimate human error may take place. Maybe they've provided something wrong in the bank details, or with haven't given you the full formal company name. You do have the opportunity, obviously, to give them a chance to correct it, to correct an honest mistake. But ultimately, if something still doesn't add up, we're going to prevent that flowing through any further in the process. Okay, really appreciate everybody taking their time today. I hope you've learned something. We'd be delighted to have a further conversation with you within your organization about your particular challenges, your particular concerns, just maybe on your way out the door. I'll just put up another poll question. So based on what we've explained today, how confident do you feel in your particular organization's existing fraud controls, and if you feel that something needs to be added to those? Okay, well, it's been a pleasure talking to everybody today. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And as I said, I'd be delighted, along with our team here in SoftCo, to get an opportunity to talk to you one-on-one.